Hello, this is Manny Oliver. I'm director of the SBIR and STTR programs. And thank you for joining our webinar today to talk about a new phase 2 application requirement. I'm going to give another minute. Some of the still people joining. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. And we'll also be joined by Dale Leschnitzer, who's part of our Office of Information Management, who is the actual cybersecurity, bringing cybersecurity expertise to this discussion today. And so let me get started, just a little bit of the background of where this requirement came from and how we are planning to address this new requirement. I see we're already getting some questions in. I'm going to go through the introduction. I'll take some background questions, at that time, and then Dale will go into the actual new cybersecurity requirements. So let me put this slideshow mode. Okay, so Congress passed an act last year, the Extension Act for the SBIR and STTR programs, and part of that was they wanted to address foreign risk. And as part of that, some of you realized last year, for example, we implemented a new requirement associated with disclosure of your foreign relationships. And again, the legislation indicated that if an agency believed that those foreign relationships posed a undue risk, that we could decline such an award. And again, with regard to foreign risks, I just want to point out the main countries of concern are China, North Korea, Russia, and Iran. The act also required us to evaluate the cybersecurity practices of applicants and awardees. And so we've had some discussion on that during the past year, and we've been implementing those requirements in 2024. Unlike the foreign disclosure requirement, where Congress was very specific about what kind of questions we needed to ask and so on, this part was left pretty much to the agencies on how they wanted to address. For DOE, we've decided not to implement any new requirements in phase 1. We already have quite a number, as you know, of application requirements, and we felt that at this time, given that we do also have a lot of startups, and that we didn't want to impose a new cybersecurity requirement for phase 1 awardees. Something we could review in the future. So our main focus will be phase 2 awardees, and what we've decided to do is have each applicant submit a cybersecurity self-assessment. And then again, as part of your phase 2 application, we will examine your practices and determine whether that poses a significant risk. Now, we've decided to leverage a self-assessment form that's actually been developed by the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, also known as CISA. And they have a cybersecurity performance goals checklist that we will be using. And this is a checklist that allows you to go through. There are actually 39 different cybersecurity performance goals, or CPGs, and we have only chosen to do a subset of those, partly because we believe that, again, because of our small business applicant pool, that using the full set, we feel will be too large a burden. And so, you're going to be required to fill out a subset of those, and Dale will be covering those, in the second part of the webinar. And those are listed here. This language here comes directly from the phase 2 funding opportunity announcement. And as mentioned in the funding opportunity announcement, we will, be evaluating your cybersecurity self-assessment and, examining whether, the risks that it imposes, and there may be a possibility that we would ask you to address some of those during the phase 2 period of performance. So here's just a screenshot from one part at the beginning of the cybersecurity performance checklist. Again, the form is actually relatively simple. It discusses what the issue is. For example, the first one is an asset inventory. It discusses what the anticipated cost, the potential impact on your security, the complexity of implementing the requirement, provide some other references, recommended action, and even some references. In terms of what we are asking you to do is to go under the current assessment column, put in the date, and indicate where you are with regard to implementing this performance goal, whether it's implemented, you've partially implemented it, or you're not started. And there's room over here to put some notes to describe, any issues or any situation in terms of your ability to meet that or not. As I mentioned, we'll be doing that as part of the review of risk of looking at your application, and we may choose not to fund those with high levels of risk. Dale has actually put together, a nice list. This list is, here in the presentation. It's also on our website. We do have a foreign risk management page on our webpage that references all of these if you want to go there. And again, the document, a lot of the federal resources will be available through CISA, who I mentioned before, and also NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology, is also very involved in establishing cybersecurity requirements. There's some other, again, resources, even from SBIR.gov, that are covered here. I should point out that CISA does actually a very good job with training resources. So, for example, one of the cybersecurity performance goals is to ensure that all of your staff receive cybersecurity training, and you can utilize the training that's available on that site, which is free. So many of these things are not going to be impose a cost on you for doing these things. And then the final thing I want to point out is that we are actually in the process of hiring a person to operate our cybersecurity due diligence program. They should be on board by the end of November. As mentioned, we've been working with Dale, who's part of our Office of Science cybersecurity team, and he's been very helpful in helping us launch these new requirements and helping us with this webinar today. The new person should be on board. Will also be probably being assisted with a contractor to perform some of the reviews, assist with training. And then, I'll just give you a note that we will also be conducting periodic audits. So to make sure that, cybersecurity self-assessments that are submitted are accurate, and maybe do some follow-up to make sure people are addressing things that we've asked them to address. And again, we're just launching this program this year. So even though we've defined a certain set of requirements for phase 2, we do expect those things to evolve over time. So it's not going to be, we haven't, reviewed it and decided this is our practices going forward on a more permanent basis at this time. So I will stop here and just take general questions. The next part of the presentation will be Dale going in more detail about what the cybersecurity performance goals are. And there'll be an opportunity to ask, more specific questions about those goals. But for now, I'll just see if we do have one question that came in. So this relates to who has to fill out the cybersecurity form. So at the present time, the only organization that needs to fill this out is the small business that is submitting the application. We have not pushed this out to any of the subcontractor organizations. The next question says the market research was carried out by a company organization based out of Ukraine. Does that qualify as a foreign relationship? So the foreign disclosure form will detail different types of foreign relationships you have, including a lot of business relationships. There will be cutoffs on, the timing of those relationships. So they're usually, I think, in the last 5 years, things like that. So I would, refer you to the specific questions. If, again, the foreign disclosure relationship forms have a certain portion that refer to foreign countries of concern, the 4 that I mentioned. Another section is more broad. It requires any foreign relationship. So look at those questions specific. I believe this one will probably be covered under the more general section on your recent foreign relationships. Question came in terms of, is the checklist a web form or hard copy? It is actually a PDF, fillable PDF. So you would be able to go through that. Maybe when we're finished with the presentation, I can just pop that open, but you'll be able to just download that checklist. And again, I think as I showed, I think here, again, these are just boxes that you would just fill out in the checklist. So there's, this will also make it simpler for us to process those, using a more structured data format. The question came in, what is the purpose of the year one assessment? We are currently not using that part of the form. Again, you will just fill out the current assessment and then put in any notes on the right side. DOE may elect to ask you to, for some of the things that you have not implemented, we may come back to you and ask you to implement those during the first year of your phase 2 award, in which case we may ask you to come back and fill that section out at a later date as evidence that you've addressed those. Currently, we haven't defined that yet, but again, we're leveraging a CISA form. The CISA form was not developed for the SBIR programs or for any purpose for us. Again, we're trying to utilize an off-the-shelf form where somebody's already done a lot of good background research in terms of the cybersecurity characteristics or practices you should already have in place. The audits that I mentioned would really just be it's kind of a check. We're not planning to do like 100% auditing of firms. We're planning just to do, some audits. And I say periodic, it's more just we would every year audit some fraction of the awardees or to see if what they submitted in their application matches what their practices are. We're getting some questions about foreign relationships. So this particular webinar is not about foreign relationships. We do have some Q&A webinars coming up. We will get a little more into that. Again, I would please refer to the foreign relationships questionnaire that's on our website. And if you have any questions that aren't still answered there, go ahead and send it to our SBIR-STTR at science.doe.gov, our general email address, with any specific questions. But again, our focus today will just be on the cybersecurity. I'm not trying to hold you off, but the second question, should we always include notes? Would that increase chances of SBIR approval, or is implemented sufficient? Again, just to answer it honestly, the notes are there probably really to address any issues, or if you're in progress, for example, why you're in progress and haven't implemented it, things like that. If you fully implemented the requirement, there's no requirement to put in notes. Okay, I will turn it over. I think I've answered most of these questions, so I will I'll now turn it over to Dale to go through the individual CPGs. So.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. As Manny mentioned, my name is Dale Leschnitzer. I'm on detail with the Department of Energy Office of Science as a cybersecurity liaison. I've been involved in cybersecurity for several decades now. I really want to stress that I'm going to be sticking to cyber aspects as a whole. I really don't know much about the procedure that you will have in interaction of getting your applications through the SBIR, STTR programs. I cannot answer those questions. I'm going to be focusing my talk specifically on cyber. We looked at a number of different resources earlier. We found this checklist from CISA. We liked it, and then we circled back to it. We felt this was instead of reinventing the wheel for now, we felt this was a good place to start. It is a downloadable PDF. You can fill it out. And one of the things we like about the spreadsheet, as Manny showed you a slide, it actually tells you how expensive it would be to implement a control based on your reduction in risk. So you do get a feel for how difficult or how expensive some of these security aspects are to implement for your company. We fully realize that many of you guys are not IT shops. You're going to be doing research or small business investigations into any number of different research areas. And many of you will not have your own IT operations. You may have a person who's your IT specialist, but that person may also wear other hats. And what we're seeing today in 2023 is often what will happen is people will buy a service. They'll buy a service to do some sort of IT function for them, for their company, and then rely on that. Many of the security aspects we are going to ask you to evaluate in your self-assessment may be managed by those contracts that your organization will hold with those IT providers. So, for example, I have obviously a Department of Energy email account, but I also have a personal Gmail account. So some of you may decide that you want to put your organization on Google Workspace and give everyone a shared Google Calendar and a Google Drive and a Google Gmail accounts associated with your organization. Well, Google will offer a lot of the security for you. It's built right into the products that you buy. The catch is you have to implement them. So think of it this way. If you go to a hotel, the hotel gives you extra locks on your door, right? If you decide to prop your door open while you go out and get a soda and you come back and someone's stolen all your stuff in your room, you didn't utilize the security that hotel gave you. It works the same thing with IT. So we want to stress that you may already be paying for a lot of security that you're going to see through the next slides, but you do need to make sure that the settings are in place to enforce that security. Google Workspace is an example. Many of you may be using Office 365. Zoho is another type of application used for document sharing, calendaring, things like that nature. Many of you may be using storage of data files and image files, whatever, on a service such as Dropbox or Box, and then the list goes on, right, of all the commercial providers. Like I said, they have the security there, and the second bullet is, but your IT staff, whether it be a team or a person who wears part of a hat, needs to make sure those security settings are done appropriately. So some of the examples, and we'll go through all these in more detail, is password management, right? If you're going to use passwords, and we actually urge you to not use passwords, use multi-factor authentication. When we get to that slide, I'll explain that a little bit better, as much as possible. Google does that automatically for you. Many other services do that. Your bank probably does that for you. I had to pay off my credit card today, and I logged on. And that's whenever you get this, hey, we're going to send you a text to confirm that you are actually trying to log on. That's an example of multi-factor authentication. So many of the services you use might do that for you. You just need to click the box to enforce it for your employees and your collaborators. Account management, you may get you may have a dashboard of saying who has accounts, who doesn't accounts. This way, if you have an employee who leaves your organization, you don't want them necessarily taking your intellectual property with you. Many of these commercial services will give you a way to manage those accounts on a regular basis, and you can go and deny access to someone who's left your organization. But again, it's up to you to use that service. Encryption is a big thing, encryption in data and in transit. Most of these services do that natively. Email security, making sure to look for spam type emails, phishing type emails. Many of these services will look and do all that kind of antivirus at the email level for you. Backing up your data is to things like Google Workspace, Dropbox, Box. A lot of that is there for you, built built into these commercial things. And again, those numbers in front, the 2B, the 2E, the 2H, those refer to the actual the actual parameters we want you to look at in that self-assessment in the form. So let's go ahead and look at that form. If I get the next slide, please.
Sorry, my slides are advancing.
That's okay.
Okay.
And like I said, this is a PDF that you can get directly off of CIS's website. So asset inventory, 1A, control 1A is the first item in your self-assessment. And basically it says, do you know what you got? Right? Do you know what devices you have that are part of your network? And so this might be the laptops or the servers that you have. You might be a 3D printer. If you're doing additive manufacturing, it could be any type of servers, could be scientific instrumentation that is interfaced with a computer through a computer interface. Basically, it says you can't manage from a security point of view what you don't know you have. You have to know what you have to manage it, right? And so this is what it's saying is go ahead and figure out what exactly you have, and then for any of these assets, understand, are they in your internal LAN, if they're your internal network? They may be virtual because you may be using some of these Google services or Amazon services. But again, understanding what you have. What do you have? And then they mention these things. These free services, vulnerability at CISA.dhs.gov will let you look for if your assets are not patched properly, because we're constantly patching because we have people who are exploiting those patches. But again, those free services that are on there. This is harder than it sounds. Counting things, especially as the organization gets larger, can become complex. So really keeping track of what you have is a big deal. My personal advice, I don't know if there's if there's a number for this, is I always try to tell people separate out personal from commercial hardware. If you want to use personal laptops, which is often the case, people say I'm going to bring my own laptop. Let the commercial side, your company side, be on a Google Workspace, the Microsoft Workspace, the Amazon Workspace, whatever. This way, if that person leaves and takes their laptop with them, you maintain the data because they're just using that through a browser into the interface that you have. Next slide, please. Who's in charge of your cyber? Understanding who is going to be your main cyber SME, your main accountable person. Again, we understand that cyber is not going to be your core competency. We get that, but there needs to be the buck stops here on who this is. This might be your executive in the company, and if you only have a few people, it might be okay. You do rock, paper, scissors to figure it out. But this is understanding who sets the policies, right? Who sets, okay, what are you allowed to do? What are you not allowed to do? And then who might also be utilizing some of these free services that you could potentially take advantage of. And so again, this is a structural setting in terms of how your organization is structured. Who does the buck stop with? Who's in charge of your cyber? So make sure you find somebody to do that. Next slide, please. Changing default passwords. This bites everybody. If you buy a new device, if you buy a new additive printer, let's say a new 3D printer, and it comes with a default password of user1, password is user1. Those default passwords are known. You can Google them and figure out what they are. And for example, one of the things that happened during COVID, a lot of people were buying new routers for their homes because we were all working, a lot of people were working remotely from their homes. And so we had people going by looking for Cisco routers or T-Link routers, and then trying to get in with default usernames and passwords, and we're taking over people's homes. So definitely having a policy in place to change those passwords. And if you do have an IT crew and they're installing new equipment, whether it be laptops, routers, additive printers, servers, whatever the case is, making sure that you change those default passwords. They are known and they are exploited every day. It's a very easy hack if you don't change things. Next slide, please. Minimum password strength. What's nice is, again, the use of those commercial services often will put some complexity in, and sometimes it can become a little bit comical on how hard some of the sites do it. I know my financial institute went a little nuts with that. But yeah, trying to get long passwords or passphrases that mean something is good. Set that as a policy. And normally what you can do is, again, if you take advantage of some of these commercial services, they will have a setting in there on how complex and how long you want the password to be for your users. So this way someone can't choose cat for the user. It needs to be at least 8 characters with 1 special character or whatever the case is. And this is normally a setting that you can make in the IT services. But again, the weaker the password, the more likely someone will be able to take advantage of it. And again, someone getting into your network means that they can get to all your research and your financial information from your company and your personnel information and maybe even your private information, because they can get in through that way if you use stuff. So passwords are often the very first thing that the attackers will try. So always try to use a challenging password. And again, that's a setting. That's don't leave that up to the user to do that. Let the IT guide you with that. Next slide, please. 2E, separating out user and privileged accounts. So what we mean with privileged accounts are accounts that have more authority to do things. So for example, you may have someone whose job it is to actually manage other accounts, right? So this person can add accounts, remove accounts, get logs, delete your backups. You don't want everybody in your organization to be able to do that. You want to trust that to very specific people. And then even if you have an administrator, so let's say you have Alice is your IT administrator. Alice's daily duties of checking her email, going out and looking for stuff on the web, or just communicating or sharing files through a SharePoint site or through a Dropbox site. She doesn't need to do that as privilege, because having those excess privilege accounts running all the time is a clear risk. And again, it's something that is exploited all the time. So this is, again, a setting in most of the IT services, and saying you want to run with the least amount of ability to do things from an IT point of view, security-wise, as you need, without having to be administrator. And then those who very few administrators, and then they only escalate to be an administrator when they need it. So this is 2E. Is there a new question? Let's see. Do you require 15 character passwords? That is a recommendation from CISA, and I know that there's a recommendation to even move away from passwords. You've seen a lot of that in the press lately. 15 is a good amount. It's almost impossible to remember without a password manager. I normally say start at 12 and work your way up. But again, that's up to you to set the requirement of what you want it to be. 12 is probably the minimum that I would go, but let the IT guide you. Let the IT actually, go on to Google or Amazon or whatever service you're using, and really try to take advantage of what they offer as the minimum amount. Next slide, please. Detection of unsuccessful automated login attempts. So basically what will happen is, again, let's say you have Alice working at your company, and someone figures out that Alice works on your company. So they will try to log on to your server or your services, and they'll say, okay, alice@mycompany.com. Password cat, password dog, password. Well, I know her. I've looked at her LinkedIn profile, and her daughter's name is Brenda. So password Brenda. Oh wait, she's born in 98. Password Brenda 98. So they'll try over and over and over, and they have these. And they don't do it by themselves. They have robots that do that for them. And so what will happen is if you see somebody trying to log into an account 3 times, it normally means that they've not had the first cup of coffee and they're typing their password wrong. But if you see someone trying to log on to an account 50, 60, 600 times in an hour, that's an attack. You're being attacked. And normally what will happen again with those free services, or I'm sorry, those paid services that you might be using, the Dropboxes, the Zohos, the Googles, they will stop that after so many attempts and then notify you. And they may say, okay, you can do 5 attempts now, and then you can't do anything for an hour, and then we'll let you do another 5. And that breaks the robot's ability. But then what it will also do is it should email or alert your IT manager to say, hey, we've seen something very unusual. We've seen somebody who's trying to do, it's called a brute force attack on this, excuse me, on your service. So again, try to see whatever services you're using to go ahead and to click on that setting to limit that ability and to alert you. And if you're using your IT that you can physically touch, that is inside your own business, inside your own walls, there are also settings there to say to limit that. So make sure your IT says, hey, you're not going to allow someone to try to log on 500 times. That's bad. And you see here in the controls, it's 5 attempts over 2 minutes it starts becoming a little bit suspicious. 2G. Next slide, please. Phishing resistant multi-factor authentication. This is the phishing resistant is a challenge. This is newer technology. This can be very challenging to put in place, but again, the IT providers that hopefully you might use for this are doing it for you. So, for example, like I said, I have a Gmail account, and if I log on, or Google Workspace account, a personal account, if I try to log on from a device that doesn't know who I am, it will go ahead and it'll bring up an alert on my phone saying, hey, I see that someone is trying to log in from your account in Los Alamos, New Mexico, which is where I live. Is this really you? Click yes. Some of you may be using something called Microsoft Authenticator for some of your things. That will tell you also, hey, we see someone who's doing that. But basically, multi-factor means something that you know, a password, and something that you have. And nowadays, most of the time, what you have is your phone. So often what you'll do is you'll get a text. You ever get those texts with a code saying, hey, type in the code you have here, 5239, and it's a random code, right? That's that multi-factor. What that does is prevent someone who happens to capture your password. Just now that they have your password, they still can't log on because now they need to control your phone as well. So real quick story, my mother, my 85-year-old mother, got some malware on her Apple laptop. She kept getting credit fraud problems. They kept attacking her credit cards. I went to her home and I checked and I found the malware, took it off, and it was what's called a keylogger. And I told her, I says, Mom, every time you're using your credit card, every time you type in a password, they see every keystroke that you're doing. That's the problem you're having. And so I turned on multi-factor for my 85-year-old mom. And if my 85-year-old mom can do it, you can too, in my opinion. So she's doing it just fine. And so this is something else. Again, most new IT will do this for you. It's becoming much more prevalent. Either it's through a text message or through an application, and sometimes it's still through an email. You may get, hey, check your email, click that you're actually trying to log on, and to do that. MFA, multi-factor authentication, is one of the main things you can do to protect your accounts. And I really, really highly recommend it. Take advantage of it whenever you can. But you're going to have to train your employees when you put it in place, because it can get complex if people don't know what they're doing. That goes back to that single person being your cybersecurity person. Next slide, please. Basic cybersecurity training. There's plenty of free services. You and your staff are not there to be cybersecurity experts, right? Cybersecurity gets in the way of you doing the work you want to do. We all know that. But at the same time, being aware of how cybersecurity affects your organization, your company, your bottom line, but also the personal security of all the employees as well, is a big deal. You could either develop that training yourself, or have someone, or hire someone to train, do it yourself, or you can borrow. There's plenty of training. CISA has some very good training. You could send your employees to the Small Business Association. SBA has some good training. A lot of those slides that we showed you in those resources earlier on in the slide deck has plenty of good things to do, but definitely requiring initial training and then refresher training over time. Just kind of reminding people of why we do certain things and why we don't. It's not because you're trying to be a burden. We're trying to actually protect them and the business. I mean, obviously, if your business gets hit so hard that you close, they lose their job as well. So they're there to protect their own interests as well as your company. So we definitely want that to be in effect. This one is cheap. This one's free. Next one, please. Strong and agile encryption. Again, if someone steals your data, but it's encrypted and they don't have the decryption key, which is normally a password, or some way, that's good. Or if you are communicating with somebody and you're sending an email, you're relying on the encryption of the email, or text messages. Normal SMS text is not encrypted, by the way. Or if you go to a website, if you have all your data stored in a certain site and you download it and it doesn't come encrypted, someone can intercept the network traffic, be a man in the middle of that and get all that for you. Again, good news is the technology companies are doing this for you. You should have your wireless your wireless security anywhere you have a wireless router set up in your company or in your people's homes, normally that has encryption set up by default. You have encryption on services such as, again, Dropbox, Zoho, all those companies, Amazon, all those companies I mentioned. Make sure that they do enforce encryption, and then many of the browsers will default to the encryption as well. One thing I do recommend is if you have data that is stored locally on specific devices that you can touch, like your laptop, for example. I know that I'm always paranoid that my laptop will disappear. And I do have data on my Department of Energy issued laptop, but I also know that the hard drive on my laptop is encrypted, so that if someone were to steal my laptop out of my car or out of my hotel or from the airport, that they'll get a brick that laptop is encrypted. That's why earlier on, it's really better in many cases to ensure that a Dropbox, a Box, a Zoho, a SharePoint saves that data for you, and to try to keep as little data on mobile devices as possible. Use those mobile devices to access the data as opposed to store the data. But if you do have a situation where you are storing data on something that someone can steal and that data is not encrypted, you're at risk, right? So really go ahead and try to take care of that. And data, what we call data in transit, that's data that's being networked back and forth, either between you and a website or you and your router. Like I said, most technologies today, excuse me, most technologies today do that for you by default. Next slide, please. Secure sensitive data. Again, if you go in and you type a password and you can see the characters you're typing, so someone is shoulder surfing you, standing behind you, and seeing all the passwords you're entering, that's a bad thing. So anytime you use passwords or any type of, we call them in the business, we call them credentials, or it's anything that proves you are who you say you are, and it's in plain text, you can see it. That's a risk. Again, most new technology does that for you. I used to go and with my daughters, I have 2 daughters and their friends, and I'd watch them log into their phones, and they'd walk away, and then I'd log into their phones and unlock their phones for them. I stood right behind you as you're typing in your code. I could see what you're doing. So again, most of the time, the tech that you use will do this for you. Just make sure that it's checked off automatically. This one is very easy. You don't do that. You're paying other people to do this for you in almost all cases. Next slide, please. Email security. This is giving some this gun gets a little bit geeky. Is saying, hey, we want you an all corporate email infrastructure to have START, TLS enabled, SPF, DKIM enabled, DMARC is enabled, all these things. And there's what's called a binding operative directive. And everyone asks, what is this? And the answer is, don't worry about it. Unless you run your own email server, right? So you decide you're not going to use Gmail, you're going to set up your own IT shop. And you're going to run your own IT server, your own email service. This will be done for you by whatever email provider you have. If you decide you want to have a server at your place of business, which you might do, there might be a very good reason for you to do that. Your IT person, this is something they need to come by and saying, we want this set up. And basically what this says, all these things say is that when you get email in, these are checks to make sure the email is coming in from who you think you are. So you might get an email and it says, hey, it's coming in from bob@mycompany.com. But if you look really closely, that's what it says, what your eyes see, but what your computer might see in the email server is, it's really jane@badcompany.com. These settings help weed stuff like that out. This is a geeky slide. Your Office 365s, your Gmails, your all the others will do this for you automatically. This comes in play if you're managing your own email servers. Next slide, please. Let's see, is there a new question? Is DMARC reject required? Yeah, it is. Most modern email services have this off. Where we ran into problems with this for a while was universities were not setting this properly. And I know we do a lot of collaboration with universities, but then they started getting beat up and they started getting hacked. So for the most part, it is. And again, this is an evaluation. We want you to say, we want you to do an evaluation for this. And if you don't have those settings set off, that's time to have whoever, if you're managing your own IT services, that's up to you and your IT person to say, why are we not doing this? What is the impact? How does this affect our business? If we turn this on, who are we shutting off? In 2023, I apologize, I'm losing my voice. We got the winter allergies hitting in New Mexico. In 2023, not having some of these settings set in your email server is a invitation for disaster. I'm going to go over to system backups, and I see there are a couple more questions. Back up your data. Back up your data, because I guarantee you hard drives crash, passwords get forgotten, people leave. Back up your data, and try not to back up your data on the same service that you're using it on. This way, if something happens, you get kicked out. But services like Box and Dropbox, you can sync that up with someone's computer, so that or SharePoint. So every time they work on a Word document or a spreadsheet or a CAD/CAM diagram, that data is automatically backed up to the cloud. And this way, if someone comes in and steals all your IT equipment, that data is still there. I cannot tell you how much I recommend backing up your data. It is by far the most important thing you can do. Rich, I'm going to pass on your question because it really comes down to Rich is asking with the DMARC, do we quarantine the email or do we block? What CISA recommends is again, we're going to get a little geeky here. Is you can set your email filters to, if you see email coming in with DMARC set incorrectly. DMARC is one of those geeky terms. You can have it set where the email is set aside, right? And your IT person says, okay, I'm going to get a report of how many emails are in limbo, they're in quarantine. And then you can go back to the people who sent them and saying, hey, you need to fix yours. The problem's on their end. They need to fix their server. And so what CISA does is recommend is you run in quarantine mode for the first few months if you don't have it. And then you look for patterns, right? And then you start blocking after you think you've hit everyone else. You're always going to get some stragglers. It's kind of like my family at Thanksgiving. You can't please everybody with it. But eventually, you're going to have to make a business decision on whether or not you let one collaborator in who refuses to secure their email, or you put your entire organization at risk. Okay, incident response plan. I'm chewing ice, excuse me. With my children and my granddaughter, I would drive my wife nuts. I'd go to the fire alarm. I wouldn't do it in the middle of the night. Press the test button, let the alarm go off, and the thing is going fire, fire, and watch my family run around like chickens. But the reality is we had a plan. You know, we would know we'd go out. We'd say, I'd actually put something in front of the door, says you can't get out this door. There's a fire in front of the front door. Where are you going to go? And everyone knew where they were going to go. We had a plan when something went wrong. If you were to get hacked, if you were to get phished, if you were to have a lost laptop, the time to prepare for that is before it happens, right? Now, you can't plan for everything. Again, that cybersecurity manager, that person you're making responsible, should put in an incident response plan for when something goes wrong. Do we know what we do? Who do we contact? How do we contact them? How do we ensure the data has been backed up? How do we figure out what's been lost, right? It doesn't need to be, like I said, you can't account for everything, but it needs to be to the point where you as an organization know what to do in general when something happens. It might be that you have something going on with one of your service providers, right? You know how to contact. How do you contact support, right? You know, do you have those numbers all in one place? So definitely have a plan in place, and then walk through the plan with everybody. Bring everyone together in a meeting saying, okay, we're going to pretend, okay, Abdul, you had your email hacked. You sent over stuff that you weren't supposed to. Someone tricked you, or, it happens. What do we do now? So have a plan before the bad stuff happens, because when you're trying to fix the problem without planning ahead of time, that's an issue. Next slide, please. So internet facing, this is talking about mostly about websites, but it's also collaboration sites. Whenever you have something facing the internet itself, that's not inside your internal network, it's at risk because it's getting hammered constantly. So make sure that you scan for vulnerabilities. This is that patching, and you do that. CISA will do that for you for free. They will scan for the vulnerabilities for free. If you go to some of those websites there, vulnerability at CISA.dhs.gov, they will scan and they'll give you reports on what's bad facing the internet. Then it's up to you to actually patch and fix the stuff. So you can't patch what you don't know is there. Scanning is what does it for you. This is basically looking for open windows and doors in your house that you didn't lock. CISA will do that for you for free. Again, if you're using internet services, all those IT services, they scan their stuff constantly. They're scanning their own stuff for vulnerabilities. So this is more for your own IT and your own website, especially if you are writing code for a website that people are looking at externally. Next slide, please. Incident reporting, depending on what you get hit, I did not know what your agreements are with DOE, whether or not you need to tell DOE or not if you got hacked. I'm not going to go into that. That's not my bailiwick. But definitely, hacking is a crime. Ransomware is a crime. So if you've been hit, you can work with local law enforcement, and depending on the extent, it might escalate it up to a federal agency like CISO or FBI or someone like that. But for the most part, definitely reporting internally, and then to your potentially to DOE, depending on what your agreements say. It might be definitely a recommend. And then your collaborators, right? If you have a collaborator that you lost that person's or that organization's data, yeah, they may have a contract with you where they want to know that is the case. And by the way, same thing goes with you. If you sign a contract with the collaborator loses your data. Somewhere in that contract should be them notifying you that they got hacked, but you're the ones who got impacted. Next slide, please. That's it. Look at that. And we're on time. Is there anything I didn't address? Manny, are we good? Did that cover what you wanted?
I think that covered everything. We'll just give people another minute, see if they have any last minute questions. Thank you again, Dale. I think you did an excellent job just covering those and explaining the intent and how people can address it. And again, we are going to make this presentation. We are recording this for those people who missed it and want to maybe or may want to look at it again to use in the future. So we did get, somebody did ask about the slides. We will post these slides on our website. And then we're going to also post the recording for those who registered. We'll send out an email to the registration list about that.
I was answering Whitney's question there.
Okay. Did you want to address that, Dale? I mean, it sounds like the same thing you were talking about earlier. As long as the laptops are used.
Yeah. No, I typed an answer. It says I don't have any examples to show, but definitely you can turn on MFA or things like that, and things like Workspace. You can use Microsoft Authenticator for Microsoft. I know Dropbox and Box have multi-factor. You could use your Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator to do that. Definitely, even for your personal accounts, I keep going back to Google because they're a good example of that. You can go through a security checklist. It'll take you through by the hand, literally. Do it for your personal account first, right? Secure your personal account, see how it works. It's going to work in a very similar fashion on those commercial accounts, those enterprise accounts. But try it on your own stuff first and see what it does. You'll get a sense for what those settings are. Many people sign up for an email account to get a password and they never change it. Facebook's another one, right? I log on with Facebook with multi-factor as well to look at pictures of cats, right? So, but do it yourself and you can see all those settings.
Okay, well, I think that's it, I think, for the questions. So we'll just go ahead and wrap it up. And again, thanks for everyone for attending. If you do have any follow-up questions, again, I believe we're going to have another Q&A webinar toward the end of the month. Before your phase 2 applications are due, that will, be another chance for you to ask any cybersecurity questions that you have. And again, you can always email them to our general email address. Okay, thanks, everyone. Thanks, Dale.
Good luck, everybody.